My name is Risa Shimoda. I'm the executive director of the River Management Society. And we have a really cool group of people. We're going to be talking about their jobs, which are quite different from one another, but their commonality is that they work on rivers and they are scientists. So welcome and thanks for taking the hour so that we'll be here. So the three folks who are here are that you'll be hearing from are Jessica Norris first. Jessica's home river is likely a stream by other standards, the Rose River as it leaves Shenandoah National Park. She started field work in biology, studying birds and working in Latin America, then came home to a conservation and advocacy position with American Bird Conservancy. She transitioned to the restoration firm Biohabitats in 2012 because of her family's move away from DC area. And here she started as a proposal writer, then moved into land and resource management and morphed slowly towards rivers and including recreation and visitor use in her work. She has lots of opinions about academic versus government versus consulting sectors and some thoughts about having kids and family, balancing them throughout her career. She's a returned Peace Corps volunteer and has a BS from Humboldt State and a PhD in ecology from Duke University. Tom, who is a very serious person, you'll hear more about his serious job. But Tom Slosky is a PhD. Has worked for over 30 years in aquatic ecology, specializing in stream habitat and fisheries assessment, design, and restoration. He has a BS from University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, PhD in biological sciences from University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and his research has focused on understanding the impacts of physical and hydrological alterations associated with the land use and development and ways to mitigate those impacts to improve, restore fish and aquatic life. He has worked at the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission since '98 and is currently the chief biologist of Natural Resources Planning and Management Division. And he's going to describe that because it's really interesting and a little bit different the way their organization is set up. He has co-authored numerous technical reports and peer-reviewed publications related to lake and stream water quality, fish, and other aquatic life assessments and watershed protection or restoration planning throughout southeast Wisconsin. He practices a comprehensive science-based watershed approach to water quality planning that provides the basis for the communities to make sound decisions regarding environmental, land development, and recreational issues, all with ties to strong partnership and public involvement. And Electra will be our third presenter. Is a forest hydrologist and whitewater kayak instructor. Throughout her river, she said, rivers have always been a draw. Whether in a city or in wildlands, the rivers provides me, speaking as Electra, with peace, inspiration, and joy. My connection with rivers has taken me to carriers that help heal the environment through restoration and heal people through kayaking. Early in my restoration career, I worked at a nonprofit out of Seattle called Earth Corps via AmeriCorps, and from there went to Humboldt State University in Northern California, where I earned a degree in forestry with a focus in hydrology and a minor in wildland soil science. Trees, water, and soil, the makings of a mountain riverine system. From there, I've worked in state and federal government, private consulting, and tribal government. Once I was established in my professional career, I started engaging rivers through whitewater kayaking, and after learning how to kayak, was able to become an American Canoe Association certified kayak instructor. Bridging recreation and restoration, those worlds of the river, has been a very rewarding space for me to feed my need to heal and have fun off and on the water. So welcome, you guys, Jessica, Tom, and Electra. And with that, I'll just share a couple of things collectively. Those who are speaking and others who might be attending, maybe those who might work with have a variety of titles, but they might somehow fit around or in this word cloud. But this is just to illustrate the many types of titles of jobs that our community might host. Um, and then just want to mention that this is the third in a series of 4 river career sessions that we're hosting. And the 4 topics, GIS, river safety science and policy, happen to be academic areas where we ask our river studies and leadership certificate students to take classes or do their internships or practicums. We have 17 now, just added a new one, 17 schools around the country. We're very proud of the program and I bet some of our RSLC students are here, so welcome. Here are I'm not going to go through all of these, but here are some of the topics that we have asked our panelists today just to think about, as we have, shared with them that the folks in the audience are probably students or early career folks, talking about entry level positions, what kinds of jobs are there at your organization or that were jobs of people that you work with, what are some of the competencies or skills that are important or have been important for you or might be important for others? What are some on the job trainings that you know of or have experienced? What are some pathways that might be possible for folks who are listening if they're science majors? What might be challenges for folks who are just entering the workforce, entering a new position, entering a new organization? And then any advice for folks who are starting out? Wise, any words of wisdom from folks who have been in the workforce for a little while. So those are some of the kinds of things that some of our folks will touch on. And then if some of these topics bubble up for you as of interest and you haven't heard anyone talk about them, please don't hesitate to ask when we're done. We'll have plenty of time for questions. Okay, so Jessica, you are up, and we'll just have you start and just say, next slide, when you
Okay.
want to start.
Hello, everybody. Am I hearing okay? My audio good?
Sounds good.
Seeing some nods. Alrighty. Well, let's see. I guess this whole talk is sort of about me, so it's not just an introduction of self. So I will run through. I think my focus was a little bit on the multiple sectors that I've worked in, or that's kind of what I like to talk to people about because I think it's something that people don't really focus on. It's like a lot of folks are just thinking like, oh, like I want to do what I want to do with like macro inverts and this kind of system. And I've found that it really matters who you're doing it for. So I'm going to run through a bit of trajectory, partly to show you how how nonlinear my path was to where I'm at now, running through some of these different events along my career. So I'll start with just flipping through a couple slides right after deciding I wanted to be a forest ranger and running off to Humboldt State University. I took field crew jobs in birds. Next slide. And I got to jump on deer for a while. Next slide. And I really got interested in doing similar things. I had a bug to travel and to experience uh, other countries and wildlife in other countries. And I didn't find any viable field jobs that would allow me to do that. So next slide, I went to Peace Corps, where I ended up doing a whole lot of things, but next slide, not very many of them super related to wildlife, except that I became fluent in Spanish and I got to know the birds and some of the things around me. And that helped me on the next slide go back to the next slide, PhD at Duke, where I decided that I was interested in doing something useful for conservation. And my attitude about conservation now, I don't know exactly what I thought then, but I was like, well, this is where the really smart people who are like at the top of their field, because I didn't really realize it at the time, but the only people who'd really told me what the field was like were pretty much academic professionals. And so they were always like, well, you just like, the people who are in charge of departments are like the most important people in conservation. And, come to find out that has like it was very naive of me to think that they really knew how to keep their fingers on the pulse of conservation. Because if they did, they'd probably be working in conservation rather than in the academy in a lot of cases. So I went around trying to say like, well, what's the most useful thing I could do for a dissertation? And they were like, well, you've got to follow your bliss and you've got to advance the science. And your job is to really think about how you're going to be testing these hypotheses and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, oh my God, like, don't we have enough? Like the world is on fire. Can't somebody tell me something useful to do? Like, how does this work? So I was already like a little skeptical of how academic science was going to go for me at that point. And I ended up developing a dissertation that I was trying to make relevant to a critically endangered bird in this picture. But mostly what I did was run around on the next slide to a whole bunch of different elevations and have on the next slide a whole bunch of different, field experiences with volcanic eruptions, military coup, flash floods, and then another click, a big landslide that came down like right on top of my tent. Um, I think it's the next, another click. Yeah. I was camped like right behind that building. So that was like a lot of adventure and I got a lot of international experience out of it. But I was firmly abandoning academia at that point because I felt like the role wasn't active enough for me. So I went straight to sort of what I felt like was more front lines with an advocacy and charity organization called the American Bird Conservancy on the next slide. And I became the director of their seabird program on the next slide, where we sort of zeroed in on the among the critically endangered seabirds, like which ones were the ones who are really like most likely to sort of wink out and uh, you know, go extinct on our watch. And then on the next slide, worked specifically on advocacy and some technical fixes as well. Oh, on the next slide, technical fixes for what's the biggest problem for tube-nosed seabirds, which is albatross, which is bycatch in fisheries. So we worked rejiggering the fishing gear for these guys in artisanal fleets off the coast of Ecuador for the conservation of the waved albatross and did some other things. And so at this point, I had built a program with like 5 or 8 or something international projects. And so something would go wrong and I was basically funneling the money from like an international stage to these very local folks, like that woman in the hat. She was the woman I worked with most closely, and she was, just like scrapping by trying to get enough money to field some surveys and then to get people on the boats. But something would go wrong with one of these projects, and I would be on a plane, shortly thereafter to go fix it and figure out what was going on. It was a very uh, vagile lifestyle. And so on the next slide, when I started popping these little ones out, it became difficult to keep that up. And so that was part of my influence, or that partly influenced my decision to go ahead and follow my husband's job and leave DC and go down to South Carolina, which is actually where this was posted. And in South Carolina, I started working my current firm, which is the one that's most likely come into contact with people in this like river world stuff. So I work now on the next slide at Biohabitats, and I'll say just a few things about, oh, I think I skipped some things that I meant to say. So first of all, I was just going to say that like early when I was getting into like finding my major and sort of like just deciding, I found it, I ended up feeling like it was very important that that I like liked the people that I was working with and I was hanging out with. Like I was torn between like these philosophy and theater and different career paths. And like what I really wanted was the ones who like seemed like they'd be fun to hang out with on Friday nights and Saturday nights. And that ended up being a big determinant. Like these are my people, these outdoorsy types, the ones that have banjos, like that was it's still a feeling that I walk into like the River Management Society and I'm like, oh, I'm with my people. Like I have to do all these conferences with like architects and they're looking at your shoes and I'm just like, oh my God, they're not my people. So it's like that sense of camaraderie has been an important part. I did not thrive in the academy, as you can probably tell. I mean, I did in a way, like I was recognized at the time, but I didn't love it. But it's been like a brutal watching some of my colleagues, try to get through publishing and publishing and publishing and moving around and making a lot of sacrifices for it. And then I will say that when I was at American Bird Conservancy, I was kind of nerded out on very sciencey stuff at first, and then it rapidly became apparent to everyone but me, but I guess that I was better writing and better working donors in a room than I was like at anything else I was doing because there's a lot of just very nerdy people who love birds who are working together for their conservation, and they have a really hard time, like pitching the projects and getting funding and getting, building support for them. So those skills, I was thinking about, developing skills, but like what I really developed there was probably more about writing and more about communicating and like working a room in the fundraising sense, and the sort of the advocacy or like, coalition building. And so just to say, like, even though I have a PhD from Duke and I've spent a lot of time coding in R and other things that I can no longer do because my brain is now, a half empty. What I've really served most, and especially in these jumps, has probably been other skills like softer stuff that it just turns out that was valuable. Um, let's see, I haven't been looking at the time, but I'll go ahead. I've got just a couple more minutes, I think, before I pass on to the next person. And so I will talk more about biohabitats. So when I moved to South Carolina, I couldn't get a job like in a regular conservation organization, because they like I came down to Charleston and thought like, oh, this is going to be easy. Like I'm raising millions of dollars a year up here in DC. And I got down there and they were like, well, who do you know? What's your last name? Like, have you ever played golf with this person or that person? I was just like, oh my God. I had no idea that that's what, people needed in conservation fundraising and advocacy down here, but I couldn't get a job doing at the Nature Conservancy or the River Keeper or the other places that I thought I'd be a really natural fit after working in charities. And so I got mixed up with these private people. And I was just like, oh, this is crazy. Like I never thought I'd work in a for-profit for conservation. And it turns out I kind of do and I kind of don't. We have restructured ourselves quite a bit over the last couple of years and have ended up we are now owned by a perpetual purpose trust, which has a lawyer representing Mother Earth on the council or on the steering committee for us. And so we can never be bought and sold, and we can't do anything without against the best interests of the planet. So we're a very weird, for-profit company. But anyway, the what we do is ecological restoration, and it's always been a focus on ecological restoration. We've expanded a bit into other realms, but um, we're about 1/3 engineers, about 1/3 scientists like me, and 1/3 people who are more on the softer side of like either planning or landscape architecture, interacting with other sorts of other professions. So a lot of times what we do is like sit in a specialist sort of corner and interact with people on other things. So if like a campus plan, we might have just this one niche of doing the stream restoration and the green corridors around a campus or something like that. So we're often interacting with much larger teams, which was really interesting to me in terms of the sector that I'm working in, because, you'd think like these like tree hugging charities would all be sort of friendly. And I found them to be like vicious competitors and like tearing each other up all the time. And then in the corporate world, which I would have thought was like cutthroat, it turns out that like, well, today we're priming and you're subbing to us. Tomorrow we're in direct competition. Today, you're priming and we're subbing to you. And so like the relationships and the inter relationships and work was has been much more sort of congenial than in the NGO sector, which was like totally shocking to me, except for the real monsters who never want to team with anybody. Then we all complain about them. The really, really big firms. Anyway, so I'll flip through just a couple of the technical stuff, and if there's questions more about the technical stuff, then I'm happy to get into it. But one thing that we do a lot of is stormwater rejiggering. So here's in the upper right is an outfall, behind a suburban area in Maryland, and then the same outfall after we've built and installed a regenerative stormwater conveyance during a hurricane. So in the bottom right is what it looks like after we're done doing our restoration work. We always like to say that you can't tell if we were there if we did our job well enough. We also do on the next slide larger scale floodplain restoration, and on the one after that on smaller scales back to like sort of like more of a techniques driven thing, figuring out how you can find or how you can restore streams and wetland complexes in a way that they can sort of set their own trajectory and develop, through time. So restoration, but down to a stage 0 stream instead of like the very calculated sort of engineered, intentional meanders of like a Rosgan stream restoration. This is, we're often messing around sort of at the frontiers of what the uh, what the science is and what the conventions are around stream and wetland restoration. This includes on the next slide spending a lot of time with beavers, thinking about beavers, imitating beavers, trying to act like beavers, trying to think like beavers. not necessarily trying to attract them into some of the places where we're working where they are not very popular, but using large woody debris instead of rock, and trying to lower lower the carbon footprint of our restorations has been a big focus at Biohabitats. On the next slide, floodplain restoration, where you're trying to rehydrate oftentimes former ag fields, is a big focus. And on the slide after that, oh, just another sort of technique slide about how important it is to us to use as much natural materials for snags and stream restorations. And even when we're doing like a pretty significant bank stabilization, we like to try to use local materials and use wood as possible. So that's the end of my little section, and going back to sort of the theme of the hour, this that we're going to be talking about careers. I will give you some bad advice, not bad advice, good advice, but it's like atypical career advice, maybe, is like if you look at where I started and where I ended up, it's just such a windy road that it actually makes a lot less difference, like what you think you're doing and exactly how you're planning your trajectory than how open you are to adjusting. Like if you've been trying to overcome some habit for 10 years, like screw it, just get over that. Like pick some job where you don't have to do that thing very well there very often. Like leaning into your strengths as a professional is like much more important, I think, than, like trying to follow anyone else's idea of a path. And the other thing that's influenced me a lot, which I would not have said and I would not have, wanted to hear when I was a 24-year-old, is my family. And so, having a domestic life, deciding what country I wanted to live in and what state I wanted to live in and how I wanted to arrange things. It's just so funny because you do all this like career prep and education. Like if you spent 4 years like trying to figure out how to pick a good partner in life, like you do trying to get an undergraduate degree, everybody would be happier because that's actually a really, really, really important decision about how well your life is going to go and how fulfilled you're going to be. So I know it sort of sounds anti-feminist, but that's real talk. In my view. And very specifically on the next slide, this is what anybody who's trying to get a job out of this or trying to think about it, my advice is always the same. It's do informational interviews. So find a busy professional who seems, oh, I think something didn't upload or oh well. I think that I lost some bullets on this guy because I was doing this a little bit too last minute, I think. If you hit refresh, it might pop back up, Ms. Risa. So what you do is just identify somebody whose job sounds really cool that are interested in. Ask them for 15, 20 minutes of actual time. Um, Send a CV when they say yes, and then ask them like 3 or 4 smart questions about their field that gets them talking. Don't be like, I want a job. Can you have a job? Can I have a job? Like the point is just to make the contact. They know what you're after. And if you send them a CV, which you always should do when you're asking senior people for meetings like this, they'll know, they'll have it to pass along. But like they want to say yes. They want to be helpful. They want to, offer you something, but they're not going to have a job in their pocket to just hand out usually. But the point is that once you're on your 10th one of these informational interviews, then you're like, oh yeah, because I was talking to blah 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 at American Rivers, and then the person on the other end's like, damn, this person is hungry. Like they're getting after it. They're, like making these connections, and that networking is just invaluable for actually ending up where you want to end up. When I say never say you're busy, all I mean is that as a young person, if you're a young person, just be very, very careful before you say that you're really busy, unless you know for a fact that the person you're saying it to is less busy than you. I know this is like kind of a like thing, but I mean, it totally bugs the crap out of me if some like 23-year-old is like asking me for time and asking me for interviews, and then it's just like, I'm so sorry, I had exams. It's like, girl, I've got 5 kids, a full-time job, and I just got off a plane. Like, don't even tell me like I've got exams. Like, I know you're busy, but like, don't make the excuse. Just say, I'm sorry I didn't get back to you earlier. That's like tidbit. And then at the end of every single one of these interviews, like keep track, map them out, like send them all over the country, like make your network as rich as possible, use your parents' friends, even though you hate to, whatever. Make sure that you say to that person, the last thing that you say is like, is there someone else I should speak to? And they will start thinking like, who do I know who might be hiring? You will get that contact. They get to say yes. They get to provide you with something because they want to do something and they probably don't have a job in their pocket. But that network of like, once you've made like 20 of those calls, you will have a job. And that's the end of my spiel. That's what I had to say.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Wow, that was a whirlwind. Okay, we're on to Wisconsin. Tom.
Okay, I'm gonna say mine is not that interesting for sure. I, I'm I guess my beginnings. I started in the suburbs of Detroit, and I don't know the age of anyone, of course, on this call, but I'm assuming you're much younger than even my children. But back in the age before phones and streaming and Netflix, we had a few channels on TV, and when Jacques Cousteau came on, the whole family would be, watching and going, to the next exotic place and diving, which was like uh, unbelievable, like dream things that I couldn't possibly ever, never even thought that that would be my career, but just the love of nature and discovery really brought that out. And of course, Charles Darwin and, finding new species and cataloging them and the adventure of going to these exotic places. Those are all things that for sure affected me. And of course, I was already an avid fisherman and a horrible hunter or whatever, but still very much an outdoorsman. But fishing was always my passion, and being with fish and on rivers and lakes. So and with that, oh, next slide. That's right. I'm trying to advance my own slides. It doesn't work because I don't have control. So I got my bachelor's at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and I found myself uh, I from the very beginning uh, I spent a lot of time with a lot of different faculty trying to figure out. Once I figured out that I thought I wanted to make biology my career, um, my problem was is I was too interested in many things, from just from wildlife to amphibians and reptiles, fish, plants, so. But I fell in with Dr. John T. Lehman. I was working as an intern in his lab, and I found myself volunteering on the Laurentian vessel, the research vessel, doing plankton tows, um, and on this one cruise, I was getting to the end of my degree, and it's time to make applications or whatnot. And I met faculty across the lake in the port of Milwaukee, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and the new center for, well, at the time it was now it's the Water Institute, but it was the Center for Great Lakes Studies, which was a big research facility right there in the port. And I found myself applying and entering into the program there. But then from there, I think uh, then you go to the next slide. I realized that lakes are cool and all, but the Great Lakes were really not my thing. And I fell into I switched gears a little bit, switched faculty, and realized that streams are really my passion. And with that, my PhD was the opportunity came uh, to work on this stream. First, it kind of started with, we were approached by DOT in the lab, could you come and assess the stream? And so we went out and we did this. It's not unusual, and we discovered naturally reproducing population of brook trout. And so, oh, okay, wow, could you continue to assess the stream and help come up with a design for mitigating, because they were gonna bury a big section of the stream to improve highway access, because there were some suicide ramps, those ramps that aren't ramps, they're just 90-degree entries onto the highway system. And so they're going to fix those, and a big chunk of the stream was going to be buried in, and so so after I came up with an assessment and conducted a number of surveys and did all the cross sections right, and designed the stream meanders and the routes and coordinated. And they were like, "Well, could you help us build it?" Okay, sure, and that turned into the funding through my entire thesis. And so that sort of a practical approach, really excited. It was a perfect fit for me. And you know, and I, well, spent most of my life digging ditches and swinging hammers anyway. So that very sort of applied science, being able to design, understand the goals and objectives there, and the theory and the side, and then it really helped epitomize the difference between the theory and the practicality of the theory of trying to restore habitats, uh, and the practicality of trying to actually um, coordinate this construction, uh, make these diversions, keeping traffic safe, coordinating with work teams to get out in the field, and who's going to fund those things. And anyway, it was a huge learning opportunity for me, just professionally, getting my PhD and practically, and with it, I learning a passion for fisheries. And I just wondered, this is my slide. It dates me a little bit, but that was 93 in that photo with the brown trout and the brook trout in there. But I before I forget, that's my slide to remember. I think it's really helpful if you can join a professional society, not unlike River Management Society, or in my case at the time, it was American Fisheries Society. And there are multiple chapters. There was a Wisconsin chapter of American Fisheries Society. That it was a great opportunity to interact with both practitioners, scientists, and Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources folk within Wisconsin, and opportunities to present posters and talk to professionals, and opportunities to share, your research and present. And they're all progressions as part of, and I, was very active with that, and still remain a part of me. So since 1992. Yeah, I've been a member. So that's an important part of your professional development. I think that is very helpful, um, and to keep in mind. And uh, so then let's see. I guess maybe I could go to the next slide. And yeah. So realizing, yeah, I like to get stuff done. I like to solve problems more than I like to teach. And not that what I do isn't still teaching. It's just on a different level, and doing everything from uh, uh, stream restoration design, concrete removal, fish passes improvements, to floodplain reduction, to this is a picture from Saturday morning, attending a public hearing in a local town, uh, trying to struggle with the fact of wake boats on their boat, and should they or should they not establish an ordinance restricting wake enhancement uh, activities on their lake, because we know that these things are impacting depth, impacting shoreline, impacting recreation. So anyway, just a little bit of a smattering. There's a lot of science we do, but there's a lot of policy and things that I assist with. And you go to the next slide, because I work for a place called the Southeast Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. And I know you're thinking, what the heck is that? And I had no idea either before I discovered this organization, which is kind of funny, because I was teaching a class and I had one of the lecturers I was able to find on this topic of wetland restoration and wetland delineation design, who then uh, uh, told me there was an opening in the lakes program. And so I'm like, oh, interesting. So I wouldn't have known. So to kind of follow up on the previous speakers' um, thoughts on that is, keep your options open and always be on the lookout. So I did apply and been there since '98. And an interesting thing about this place is there are 9 in the state, and they've been around for a while, since 1960. And so we have no regulatory authority, but we are. It was we were designated through the state statutes to help communities conduct inventories, prepare plans, and most importantly, help with intergovernmental coordination. For example, just last week when I was invited by the towns uh, to conduct they wanted me to talk about aquatic invasive species impacts related to those wake boats, but uh, there are multiple towns jurisdiction, and so this concept of helping coordinate and solve problems for water bodies, of course, that transcend municipal boundaries is just an ongoing challenge. But our agency is designated specifically to assist, and that's why we have no regulatory authority, but we are invited to participate if they want our help. So we have the authority to recommend, but we also have a special designation in that we are the state water quality management agency to helping to develop area-wide water quality management plans. So that gives us the authority to help assist. And that management program is coincident with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources program and recognized by the governor. And so it works well, and we coordinate sometimes studies. And for example, we're doing a massive chloride study for the entire region, and that's quite unique. And my agency itself, there are biologists like me. I'm head of a staff of 8, and my team is a combination of botanists that we do wetland delineations, we do environmental corridor assessments, critical species habitat assessments for folks in Southeast Wisconsin. We have a natural areas program where we track and inventory natural areas and critical species habitats and ways to protect those. And in addition, we have a lake and streams program where we conduct watershed inventories, do land use plans or comprehensive land use plans, or we're doing aquatic plant management plans or preliminary dredging studies, you name it, we can assist. And if we're not doing the work, we could help assist to get funding to bring in folks like biohabitats to come do your work. So we don't have to do all the work itself, but we're just there to facilitate. And I think don't oversell. There are many colleagues of mine that also are serving in local units of government at county levels or sometimes even town levels where there's opportunities. So don't always, keep your eyes open, because you can have a job. Maybe you can't do all the things you'd like to do, but I think sometimes there are great opportunities in local governments, and local governments like my own, that are there to provide opportunities for your talents. And so I think that is pretty much all I had to say, I think at the moment. So I think I'll pass it on to the next speaker.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
And next up, last but not least, Electra. So you're on. I'll just have you go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Electra. I live in northern coastal California, where Humboldt State is. Just a little plug for Humboldt. Our national forest here is called Six Rivers. There's lots of rivers here and lots of river science. So I call myself a forest hydrologist. What is a forest hydrologist? A forest hydrologist, I have a background in forestry. I also have a background in stream restoration, and I have a huge pull towards wood and streams, woody debris. This is a picture of the type of work I like to do. I like to use natural resources or natural systems to create restoration. So I play a lot with wood. Okay, next slide. So gaining skills. There are so many different types of skills, as you know, that you can gain. And a lot of my skill gaining was through volunteering. And I cannot emphasize enough on how much volunteering has changed my life in so many different ways, and just raising my hand and saying, yes, I'll do that, or yes, I'm interested in that. And so I learned how to snorkel for fish through a volunteering. I learned how to run a meeting through volunteering. I learned how my river skills through volunteering. I learned about vegetation management through volunteering. I started my career through volunteering. I've gained a lot of jobs through volunteering, and sometimes you get paid. Volunteering isn't necessarily a free thing, but a lot of times it is free on your time. As Risa said earlier, I started my career through AmeriCorps, and that was AmeriCorps is a federal umbrella that supports nonprofits in all different types of sectors. And one of those sectors is restoration. And so I worked for a organization called Earth Corps specifically, and they're out of Seattle, and they do all sorts of different type of restoration events. And that's where I learned about stream restoration. Prior to that, I grew up in the city. I didn't know anything about anything. My rivers, there were natural rivers, but there was a lot of concrete rivers. Places where I like skateboarded when they were dry. And I found out about Earth Core through just my buddy moved up to Seattle, and a bunch of us were going to go visit him. And I jumped in the car after work one day, and we drove up to Seattle, and it happened to be Earth Day, and he went to a restoration event, and I just fell in love. So you never know, by just jumping into a car or raising your hand or volunteering for something that seems not relevant, where it's going to take you. In my upper corner, it's me with a group of people, and I was part of a group of people, and we put on music events. And I learned how to run a meeting and get money and set up logistics and all that stuff through music events, which has nothing to do with restoration, right? So yeah, and you know, and the skills can be anything. Yeah, it could be anything from human skills to scientific skills to river skills. I can't emphasize enough river skills. If you work in a river, be comfortable around water. Maybe it's not your favorite thing. I have colleagues that like don't like swimming, but they have a PFD, a personal flotation device. They've done swift water. They know how to be around it. They know the steps if something happens. Maybe they're the ground support because they don't like being in the water. River skills are huge. Yeah. So if you're going to work around water, learn how to work around water. And you're always going to work around people. So you got to learn how to work around people too. And that's some of the softer skills that were touched earlier. But learning how to effectively communicate is a huge thing. And what type of communication you're going to use. So sometimes in the science world, we have very like strict science communication styles. my dad worked for the Air Force. He wrote manuals for jet planes, so he had to learn how to communicate in a manual formation, like standard operation manuals, which scientists do standard operation communication all the time as well. And as it's been previously mentioned, we work with a lot of different organizations. If you're doing a project, you're usually not isolated, so you need to know how to communicate with the nonprofits, with the government, with the for-profits, with the hillbilly down the street, with the high elective in office. You need to be able to talk to everyone. So knowing, having the skills and the comfortability with that is huge, and that'll get you far. Next slide. And that goes into building your network. And this has been touched on by our previous speakers, but your network will get you far. And your network doesn't have to be a bunch of nerdy scientists. Like I said, I have a bunch of musicians in my life too. I have artists, I have all sorts of people, and they have all brought me to where I am today. And I didn't even know that there would be a connection. You know, you never know until after, right? You could just be talking about your hopes and dreams at dinner, and the server hears about it, and their mom works for some organization, and there you go, you got a job. So, and with that note, I just want to say, don't be shy about what you want. Talk about it. Talk about what you're interested in. Talk to people. Say hi to people. Don't be shy. You know, maybe you're more calculated and you want to be more pointed about how you talk. Maybe you're more casual on how you talk. That's up to you, but don't be shy about what your hopes and dreams are. And that also, the having clarity in that also helps. So understanding what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, like really do a deep dive. And that could be in a professional setting, that can be in a personal setting. And then understanding what your just understanding what you want, right? Do you want family? Is family a priority? Is maybe where you want to live a priority? Maybe the topic you have is your priority, and just being clear with that. Because if you're not clear with what you want and need to succeed in life, other people are going to see your skills and they're going to use you for their plan. So understanding like what your plan is and putting yourself forward and not just letting other people put you in their plan and taking advantage of you, and not necessarily in a bad way. Like my last boss was taking advantage of me, but it totally helped me out because I didn't know what I wanted at the time. So I was like, yes, please take advantage of me. But understanding what you want and where you want to go will really help other people get you to where you want to go. Because if you're talking to someone about a future job and they don't know what you're talking about, then they can't help you get there. Yeah. So, and your network, you know, I have people who I thought I would never see ever again. And 10 years later, boom, we're in a meeting together. So you never know who's going to show up. And with that, you can't always leave relationships in a positive, you know, sometimes things crash and burn. But being polite gets you a long way. Saying thank you. And I'm very sincere about this. Like in a professional setting, we're all very busy and stressed out, but just acknowledging gratitude and appreciation for other people, it goes a long way. And it humanizes you, and people remember that. They remember that you said thank you. I know it sounds small, but it's a big deal when you're in a high stress, multi-million-dollar project. Next slide. Okay, so everything else. I was last, so I made sure that I had room to talk about some other things that maybe weren't talked about. And so I'm going to look at my notes here. Yeah, some good entry-level positions. Like I said, AmeriCorps is a really good opportunity. You're a full-time volunteer, so you earn scholarship money at the end of it, and you get like a monthly stipend to live off of. You also gain leadership experience. You gain whatever skills that nonprofit you work for. Having AmeriCorps on my resume has opened a lot of doors, a lot, or Peace Corps for that matter. These are positions that show that you're willing to go through the grind and support your community. And then another program that is really cool is called the Watershed Stewards Program. And that's based out of California. And I think there's like 30 different sites along the California coast. And it's another umbrella organization that links you into different groups. So you could work for a tribal government, you could work for a nonprofit, you could work for a for-profit, you could work for a government. Again, that's called the Watershed Stewards Program. And so something I did in my career while looking for a job was when I was in college, I specifically worked for a different type of place every summer. So I worked for the feds, I worked for the states, I did research academic summer, I worked for private consulting, just to know what I wanted. Because until you do it, you don't know. And honestly, all of this, we can tell you all these skills you can get, and we can tell you different paths, but until you just do it, you just gotta do it. And you gotta learn what's for you. And sometimes you just gotta find out, like, yep, I don't like that. Okay, I'm gonna find something else. Because learning that you don't like something is just as valuable as learning that you do like something, or learning that you're good at something, or learning that you're not good at something. Really honing in on those skills, like Jessica was saying, like, okay, I want to do that, but I'm not good at it, so I'm just gonna like lean into my strengths.
Maybe Electra, another minute or so, and we'll take a couple questions and then head towards wrapping.
Okay. And then something I was talking to my colleagues about, like, okay, what would you guys want to hear at this panel? And something as far as just like a tangible skills, and learn your equipment. Take the time to learn your equipment. You're going to be around a lot of different types of equipment, and they all have manuals and they all have YouTube. Take the time. Take the time to clean your equipment. Take care of the things that are given to you. It shows your colleagues and your bosses that you're taking care of the things that cost a lot of money and take a lot of time to get, and that you're not taking it for granted. And it shows that you really want to understand how to do your job and how to use the tools that are given to you. Read the manual. I know it's boring, but do it. Yeah, clean the truck. It makes a big difference. And these are, it's you're a shared space, so respect that shared space. Okay.
Thank you so much. Lots of great advice, all of you. Thank you so much. Besides talking about what you do. So we're getting close to wrapping. What I would really appreciate, I've got just a couple more slides and then we'll have some questions, but Tom, if you could paste that link in the chat. This is a survey before you leave us today. If you could take a minute, it probably will only take a minute to provide some feedback. And then a reminder for folks who are attending that we will have one more of our 4 event series on river careers in a couple of weeks. On the 5th, we'll be talking to 6 people who do policy. River policy is their work. We'd love to have you share your thoughts in the survey. And then here are things that are coming up with RMS. I'm going to go to the chat in a second. We have Southeast Chapter Float, 3 days on the Cahaba River with the Cahaba River Society coming up this weekend. The policy career session, like I mentioned. we'll have a river management roundtable with our water trails working group, talking about landowner relationships. And then in the middle part of November, we'll have, which is kind of a hallmark thing for us, is a restoration workshop with Dr. Field and Dr. John Fields. We've done these once or twice a year for the last few years. I'm very proud of that program and of him. So I'm going to stop sharing. And if you have questions, now we're going to look at the chat and see what folks.
And if you could turn on your cameras, especially if you're going to ask a question.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Whitney, Will, and Lauren.
Nice.
I resent the link. So
Kudos. Yeah, great. Thank you. Kudos to Jessica. Shout out to AmeriCorps. Some thanks from Claire. If anybody has questions, if you have questions, I would just go ahead and unmute, and because we have just a couple more minutes left, and you guys would be so cool. Go ahead, Lauren. Go ahead.
Well, thank you everyone for your insights. I am just kind of wondering if graduate school is kind of seen as necessary in this day and age. I've done AmeriCorps, I've done a lot of other things, and I'm still kind of struggling to get that job. And while I think that there are other reasons to go to grad school besides just getting a job as well, I'm kind of interested in hearing professionals' opinions on this in today's world that we live in.
I'm not sure what today's world means, you know, like going forward, a lot of things are changing very fast, but I found it impactful to me. You heard me kind of grousing about like how egg-headed my experience in the academy was. And I was watching people take master's degrees and get straight into jobs that I really wanted. So that's the difference between two different graduate degrees. But in my case, somebody said, look, you know, you're going to have you're going to have an invisible ceiling if you don't get that degree. You know, it's like there is going to be a level at which they won't look at you, you know, if you're, depending on how ambitious you are. And I was like, okay, I'll go ahead. I'm not sure that's true forever. There's certainly alternative paths.
I did mean to talk about master's program. I honestly would say go if you have a project you want to work with, if there's someone you want to work with. I know lots of people that just go to grad school to go to grad school and they don't really gain anything except for debt. And I also have colleagues that never went to college at all and they're leads in their field because they just used their network and worked hard. So like I said, yeah, with the volunteering, like I got a lot of jobs through volunteering and not necessarily through my academics. So there's other pathways.
Tom.
I don't know if it helps. The last 3 staff I've been able to hire, they all had only, not just only, but only master's level. So it's still possible. I consider the application, and I reiterate what Electra and Jessica have been saying, that those are important things to me. Those volunteering efforts and those extra efforts by you beyond just your schooling is it's very impressive to me. Showing that interest and diversity and background. So yeah, I would say don't go for a PhD just to get a job. I don't think I would have survived.
I'll also throw in, you don't have to go now, right? You don't have to go, you know, right now. So if you're not sure, you can go later.
I was offered masters a couple times during my years of field work. You know, like somebody would say like, oh, we want you to keep going on this project. You know, we have like the state agency has a cooperative agreement with the university. Like if you're worried about that practicality part of it, like absolutely make sure somebody else is paying for some of it and you're on a project that's already existing and people really need you. Like don't just run off and my impression is that doesn't make a huge difference like what school you go to. I mean, I'm sure there's some crap schools out there, but like if your work is good and your professor's good, that's what's going to matter.
Yeah, and if you maybe want to break between undergrad and grad school, like gaining certificates will get you a long ways too, like gaining things that you can put on your resume. And you can do that through different societies like RMS.
Oh, I will say one thing that sometimes so we don't hire at the entry level usually biohabitats because we're really like niche. Like a lot of the people who do a lot of stream restoration, a lot of river management, like are just monstrous engineering firms. And it might not be like, oh, this is my dream job. I want to be, part of a huge faceless hierarchy, but like it is a great place to just like get out there, develop those skills and like grind for 2 years. And they often have great tuition, like if you're earning A's, you're not paying a dime, for like that kind of thing. Like it is a great place to like get started, like, get up a little ways and, they're a lot easier to get than like the dream job sometimes, but like doing wetland delineations for or for whatever, some monster engineering firm is like, it's as good as a master's in a lot of places.
Yeah, and whether you need certification for ArcMap and ArcPro or not, but those certificates or things like that, and programming R and all those things, data manipulation is a big deal. It's such an essential component of restoration and land use planning. It's a critical thing to be able to be able to share that you've got competency or at least familiarity in those are really important as well, building that resume.
Anyone else before we wrap? Don't be shy. In your room. Okay, everyone shy.
So do they have our emails? Do you have our emails?
We'll make sure that everyone has it.
How many emails are we going to get after this?
Everyone who's signed up will get a copy of the program and be happy to share your email with
Yep.
them for sure.
If we're willing to do this, we're the kinds who will respond. So you should, we'll notice who follows up.
Yeah. No, we had a great group. I think it was a total of 26 people on, so it was really a great group. And thank you so much. I hope this has been helpful. And I thank you guys, Jessica, Tom, and Electra for sharing your lives, inspirations, and I think your endorsement for pursuing what calls to you, what your passion is, and not being bound necessarily by super straight lines. So thank you, everyone. Couple of great big thanks.
Risa, thank you for putting this together. Talk about following your bliss and finding a new niche in the world that nobody realized how much they needed until afterwards.
Yes,
you are an inspiration to all of us.
Well, we are niche and we're narrow and deep. It's river world, right? Yeah, so thank you, everyone. And for anyone who's here, if you RMS at river-management.org, don't hesitate to be in touch. Facebook, Instagram, whatever. So thank you so much. Have a good day. Happy Halloween. Good luck to all of us on the planet here. Take care, everyone. Thank you again so much.
All right.
Thank you guys. I really enjoyed it today.
Yep.
Thanks.
Take care, Lauren.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.